Hello, my name is Caroline Smith, and I'm reading Indians of the Oaks by Melicent Lee. This is Part 1, Chapter 6, Pottery Weather. The village people were very glad to see us. We made a big feast that night around the fire, and we divided all the things that we had brought from the desert. The days grew warmer. It was just the right kind of weather for making pottery. If the weather were damp or rainy, the pottery would not dry quickly enough. Opachuk decided to make some new oyas. "Go down to the creek," she said to me, "and get me some clay." I lined my net with leaves and hung it over my shoulder and started for the creek. I hunted carefully for the right kind of clay. I kept going farther and farther. Finally, I found some clay that was smooth and red. "This is the clay," I said to myself. I gathered a lot of it in my hands and put it in my net. It seemed very fine clay. When I showed it proudly to Opachuk, she took some of it between the palms of her hands and swiftly rubbed it into a little cake. Then, smiling kindly at me, she shook her head. "This is not right," she said. "You will have to dig deeper where there's not quite so much sand." I went to the creek a second time, and I dug deeply with a stick of wild lilac. Wild lilac is very strong. When I returned again, Opachuk said, "This is still not the right kind of clay. You'll have to still dig deeper." She is very fussy, I thought, but I said nothing. I knew that white people were particular, but I had never known that Indians were. It seemed much harder to be an Indian boy than a white boy. I went to the creek a third time. I walked away down toward the south. As I turned around the bend, I saw an old Indian digging with a stick. "What are you getting?" I asked. "I'm getting clay for my wife," he answered. "This is the best clay in the creek." "May I have some of it?" I asked. "Take all you like," he said. Then I knew that this time I was getting the right clay. I could see where it had been dug out for many years, maybe 100 years or more. Who knows? Opachuk rubbed this clay between her fingers. She smiled happily. "You'll make a fine Indian some day," she said. She didn't know that I had met the old man digging clay for his wife, but the next time I should know for myself which clay to get. In a few days, Opachuk started making her oyas. She sat in the sunshine and neatly placed all her things around her. The other women gathered near her with their children. Opachuk was the best oya maker in the tribe, and she knew it. She broke off a piece of dry clay, put it in her stone metate, and rubbed it into powder with a rubbing stone. She felt of the powder that she had rubbed it so carefully with her fingers. "It is not fine enough yet," she said. So she put the powder in a sawil, or winnowing tray. This was a round basket, almost flat, in which seeds were tossed up so the wind could blow away the husks. Now Opachuk was shaking the basket up and down to bring the lumps of clay to the top. Then she scraped the lumps back into the metate and ground them again. When the powder was ready, it was as fine as dust. She mixed it with water, which she kept in a little oya by her side, and worked it with her hands into a smooth clay. The children reached out their little fingers to snatch pieces of the clay for tiny oyas. They made funny little jars that did not sit evenly upon the ground. After the clay was smooth enough to work, Opachuk patted some of it into a large flat cake, which she had laid over the base of one of her old oyas so that the bottom of the new oya would be correctly curved. When the base was just right, she began to make rolls of clay between the palms of her hands. The clay rolled beautifully. It did not fall apart. She added a coil to the oya base and pressed it into shape with her fingers. Again and again she added coils. When the base was big enough, she took it off the old oya. Then she pressed the coils into shape on the outside with a little wooden paddle and on the inside with a short clay paddle. As the oya grew into the wide round shape of a cooking oya, one of the women said, "I will exchange my seed basket for your oya." But Opachuk shook her head. "I do not need a seed basket. I can make a seed basket as well as you can." Everybody laughed at that, because they knew that she was right. There was no household task that Opachuk could not do well. When the oya was finished, Opachuk said, "Now I will let it dry out. When it is perfectly dry, I will fire it in the pit. It may take 2 or 3 days to dry." She walked toward the pit to see that everything was ready. The pit was lined with stones. Brush for the fire lay beside it. What a fine figure she had. She might have seemed too large to some white people, but I had learned to like big, strong, comfortable Indians best. To me, they always seemed like mountains in which I could hide when I was cold or tired. Opachuk's long hair fell to her waist, and her face was painted with scarlet stripes and dots. Around her neck she wore a string of deerskin with a piece of abalone shell hanging from it. "Hun," she said. "Soon we shall be eating shawi out of my Oya. Shawi means acorn mush. Apashuk smacked her lips. When the summer is done, we shall gather our acorns, she said. Now there's much to do to get ready for the journey. I will start a new seed basket soon. She smiled to herself. Seed basket, seed basket. She wants to exchange a seed basket for my Oya. Her basket won't hold seeds. Then she gathered up all her materials and walked off to her little hut.